Hey guys, welcome back. BDCKR here. We're back with season 13, episode 18 of our weekly Q&A thing. You're consuming it how you're consuming it, and so there's no point belaboring the point anymore. To start off, we got sort of two things, right? Do you want to talk about what people are watching if they're watching the video, or do you want to talk about the real life stuff first?
Real life, because I think it's not going to be that long. Maybe,
Okay.
I mean, we're going to ramble and it'll
It'll be how long it
bust
is.
my expectations. So the Canadian elections are coming up.
Yeah.
Federal elections, it's going to be next week, Monday is the final day. I've already voted at one of the advanced polls.
Yeah, I've also already advance voted.
I am very, I guess, I'm on tenterhooks a little bit. Cause
apprehensive, hopeful,
yes,
worried.
Yes. Yeah, all of that.
A lot of stuff.
A lot of suspense about what's going to happen because I think our country can go in two very different directions.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's any amount of hyperbole when we look at the platforms that each of the leaders, the two frontrunners, are pushing.
There's a pretty big distance between them in terms of what I want, right?
And there's a lot of similarities between one of them and what was on offer from Trump.
Yeah.
Almost uncanny, the similarities.
So it's really, it's not that I'm going to be celebrating one option and upset at the other. It's that I'm upset at one option and I'm going to be breathing a sigh of relief that at least it's not the other, right?
Right.
There's nobody who I can look at and go, no matter who they were running against, I would definitely vote for this person, right?
Right.
There's nobody where I go, every part of their platform, I can't imagine anybody else leading me. This person feels like they represent me so well. But there's a person who I go, man, I really hope they don't win. And another person who I go, man, much better than the alternative, right?
Mm-hmm,
than the only sort of likely alternative, right?
Yeah.
Which is too bad. It's shouldn't be how you feel about politics, but it frequently is.
But the more I see, the happier I am about my choice. I think this is the problem. In debate or argument, there's a thing called the Gish Gallop.
Yeah.
And it's named after a guy who, in order to win debates, would just throw out so much junk out there. Like, just say so many things that could be refuted and sounded reasonable enough that should be refuted, but it made actually having a proper discussion impossible. Mm-hmm. That Gish Gallop is just throwing so much stuff, hoping something sticks. And if you don't take the time to just, unstick everything, then it feels like they've won to either an observer or somebody who's on their side.
There are bad faith ways to argue that are at least visually effective and that can often be convincing, right? To certain types of people. And that the less you are sort of aware of what those strategies are and how they work, the more likely they are to work on you, right? Because I think in general, the best balm, the best way of counteracting misinformation and bad actors sort of taking advantage of making you feel emotional or angry or really fired up is to be more informed. And so
good information.
I'll recommend Innuendo Studios, the Alt-Right Playbook series of videos. Those are quite interesting and informative. I mean, obviously you can tell based off of the titling that at the very least the person creating the videos is anti-alt-right, right? They're trying to walk through the strategies and structures of the alt-right and how they work and why they're effective, right? Mm-hmm. But that's a quite good video series. And I think a lot of it is informative, I think, regardless of what your politics are. But I guess I can't really say that for sure because I only know my own politics and my own perspective. So maybe that's not true.
Yeah. I think that is a good point, though, to be better informed, because I think if I didn't know certain things better, some of the slogans would be appealing.
Yeah.
I mean, who doesn't want safety?
Yeah.
He promises safety, and he's gonna introduce a 3 strikes law. He's gonna introduce a law so that people who with life sentences serve them consecutively, so that instead of being eligible for parole after 25 years, it'll be 50 years or 75 years or however many consecutive sentences.
Yeah.
And who doesn't want safety? I want to be safe.
And again, we talk about emotions, right? I think Minute Physics released a video recently about the pause, which is when you I'm going to summarize it in brief, but this is really worth watching. It's a great video. And, you know, if anybody here is listening to this and they like the stuff that we say at all, I think that's a more interesting, better structured sort of thought. And it's sort of the idea is that when there's misinformation or when there's information that you're being presented with, stuff that gives you pause, that what you need to do is you need to develop that sense of the pause and then do something about it, right? Which is to re-verify information, to think about it. And one of the things that he talked about as a cue to make him pause is when something is trying to make you emotional in some sort of way. Mm-hmm. Stuff that makes you feel good or angry or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. That stuff is the stuff that sort of hits your brain and hits that sort of quick knee-jerk reaction pathway, right? And people know that. So anything that is making you hit your knee-jerk reaction, and another thing that's important is stuff that you already agree with is more important to pause. If something validates your pre-existing worldview, right? Mm-hmm. That is the stuff that is more important to pause about, because it's really, really easy for somebody to just feed you something wrong because it feels right. Mm-hmm. And that is entirely independent of politics. Everybody is vulnerable to that, right? You're a lot more likely, if you read something and you go, yeah, that makes intuitive sense. It's new information, but it fits with everything else that I already believe. Mm-hmm. When it's clearly partisan or structured to be that kind of piece of information for a like recognizable group of people, whether that's like progressives, leftists, liberals, whatever. When there's something really clearly in that category, it is more important for you to take a step back and think about it, right? Mm-hmm. And so when we talk about safety, and you talk about, like, of course you want, you know, safety, right? You don't want there to be dangerous streets, right?
Right.
That stuff is making you emotional. And if you are conservative, because that's a more frequently conservative talking point, it is validating things that you already believe, right? And then when you look at those sort of raw statistics and numbers, right, that is also, you know, being presented as like information that has all of its required context to understand it and interpret it contained just in the numbers itself. And that's why that's when you need to take a step back and think about it.
I mean, I see the point, but it's not exactly what I was trying to get at. Yeah. I think this is one of those things, it's not so much that I need to pause, it's that it really flies in the face of what I've actually already looked up. Mm-hmm. And that's why I think debates are a poor way to actually broadcast your kind of policies, because it's doesn't favor the person who's got the better policies. It favors the person who's better at debates. Mm-hmm. And I'm just going to finish the original specific idea. It's that we know that there have been studies that have been done that show that, you know, the more you put people in prison, crime rates don't actually go down. Mm-hmm. And the 3 strikes, I don't know about the 3 strikes run, but I'm pretty sure that's also true, that it doesn't actually decrease the rate of crime, but it does a weird kind of thing where I think you've talked about this, where it gives you sort of a weird incentive.
Yeah.
So the idea of 3 strikes is it's meant to be a deterrent. So there's no real sort of proper or commensurate punishment. Like, it doesn't mean the punishment for this crime. If anything, it potentially doesn't, because no matter how minor or how big the third thing is, you get the same punishment.
Yeah.
And it's a weird incentive, because if you're aware enough of the law that it can act as a potential deterrent, it does the opposite for you. Mm-hmm. It means that if you're still motivated because you're desperate enough to commit a third crime, knowing that you've been convicted twice, well, you can do something small, or you can do something big,
and the punishment will be
exactly the same.
Yeah.
And the other part is, from a practical point of view, I mean, it sounds great that, you know, if you really want these kind of laws to come into place, that one party is saying, well, we'll use the notwithstanding clause before we get into trouble.
Yeah.
Because we will use it to push past any kind of objections to charter right violations.
Mm-hmm.
And the ridiculous thing is, on the face of it, it makes no sense, because the notwithstanding clause was meant to be sort of an emergency sort of pressure valve to allow the government the option to do things. When the charter was first introduced, they didn't want it to be so... There were people who were objecting to it that it was going to be too much absolute kind of restrictions, and they wanted the government to have the chance to be able to do things.
Yeah.
It naturally has an expiry date of 5 years if you use it. So if we're talking about literally bail eligibility, right? Or sorry, not bail, parole eligibility, that you can apply for parole after 25 years. What's the chance that a federal government is going to last for 20 years so that 25 years from now, the first person who is affected by that will still have the law in place? Pretty much zero.
That's a good point.
It's a bunch of noise. And I mean, outside of what you actually believe, using the notwithstanding clause on something that's not actually going to potentially have effect until 25 years from now is
a little silly.
Pretty stupid.
Yeah.
Like it makes no sense. And the only people it'll fool would be the people who don't care enough to do the math, or just can't do the math to figure out that it's actually not like a real solution to anything.
And I want to say one more thing while we're talking about crime, just because I think that this might be obvious to people, but it wasn't to me. And I think it's interesting because I want to take our step back and just talk about definitions. And again, I think this might be obvious, but there is no such thing as a criminal in the trait sense. It is a term that we ascribe to people, right?
Right.
We have laws.
Yep.
And how they are enforced and reported, and the data that we collect on them is the entirety of how we determine what a criminal is.
Right.
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 So, for example, if you have stricter laws, what you'd expect to see initially is not less criminals. It's actually more criminals, right?
Sure, because you're
there are
redefining
people
stuff
who before weren't considered criminals who are. And the other thing is that the data collection and reporting is so important too. So this is not to say that stats on violent crime should be entirely thrown out, but small changes in how you count them and how police stations, for example, when police stations, if your goal is to get crime lower, right? One of the ways that you might do it is underreporting crime, is downgrading the severity of crime. And I want to take the example, I don't remember what the name of the algorithm was, but in New York, right, they had a policing algorithm that they implemented that was meant to better use police tools, police resources and time, right? Mm-hmm. And so they used sort of like hotspot generation. They used previous crime data to analyze and figure out which areas in crime was most likely to occur and dedicate more policing resources to that. And what it ended up doing was sending more police to places that were already historically more policed because there are more reports. There's more findings. You find more stuff. If you're sitting there and watching, right, where you put down, if you put down a speed camera somewhere, right, there will be way, way, way more speeding violations recorded at that spot than a place that, cops show up at once a month, right?
Right.
Just because how else, when are you going to catch them otherwise, right? And so it was this sort of self-fulfilling prophecy where places that were historically over-policed, right, like black and brown neighborhoods, right, lower socioeconomic areas were over-policed. They had more stuff found there because they were sitting there and watching. Yep. And this is entirely independently from, any argument about what the baseline level of crime in any place is. Because in general, too, the more desperate people are, right, the more crime does happen there, right? Yeah. Or at least the more types of crime that is really easy to look at, right? When we're not talking about like white collar financial crime, when we're talking about the type of sort of smaller scale stuff that people generally, think of and are trying to police, right? And it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So this is all just to say that when you look at crime statistics, right? When we talked last week about COVID and how there's a huge jump in a lot of these crime stats for COVID, right? And also that, is associated with economic uncertainty and all this other stuff, right? We talked last week, I think, a little bit about how hot weather increases the rates of crime. I don't know if we did, but it's also true. So the point that I'm trying to make is that we really need to reject simple things that make you feel good as ways that you should organize your life and your policy. It is okay for simple things that make you feel good that only impact you, right? For you to live life that way, right? It's sort of like hedonistic is the term, right? When you
pleasure.
follow pleasure.
That's pleasure. Yeah.
So that's like eating snacks and whatever, playing video games, whatever. Doing stuff that makes you feel good for you is totally okay. But when we're operating at the level of policy, at the level of sort of like research and execution of these big things, you need to resist the simple explanations.
Because you need to consider more people. And
the important part is you don't need to be the person who is thinking about those increased levels of complexity. You need to not be swayed and sold by this really simple stories, right? Because life is more complicated. You can only engage on a certain level, right? So I'm not expecting people to do a massive amount of research on every single piece of policy platform, but liberal, conservative, progressive, anything. If something is sold to you really, really simply, right? It is an oversimplification. And if there is a simple sort of initial pitch and then a nuanced and complex proposal underneath it, then that might be true. But if what the person is telling you, and when I see like Polyev, right? A lot of the stuff he's saying is he's got a simple pitch and a simple model, and it seems like the model that he's using is the simple model. There's not a complex thing underlying it, and he's giving you sort of a simple take home as an individual. That is the stuff that's really dangerous, because you want to know that the person whose job it is, right, whose whole career it is to look at the nuance, look at the complexity, analyze it at a level that you could never be expected to or reasonably want to understand it at, and then make decisions based off of that. You want that person to be looking for the complexity, even if you can't personally.
Yeah.
I guess in that context, though, it almost feels like there's a synergy between that and making people distrust experts. Right? Because the more that you distrust experts, the more people are vulnerable to that kind of thinking, right? Where they think an internet search is actual research. Yeah, no, it's helping a couple ideas congeal in my head a little bit.
Yeah, so I think a lot of what I said is not that complicated, but it's also just stuff that is important to me, I think, worth stating, even if you kind of already get it, maybe. Yeah. Anyways,
Fair.
So now, what are we looking
all right,
at?
So now you've had the chance to watch the last 15 minutes of footage. This is the season 13, where we are trying to spend more time with each challenge character in the Q&A before they actually show up. So it relies on us guessing who's coming up and relying on the pattern still holding. We are still hopeful that there's going to be a few more changes no later than 3 weeks from now. But, we're still getting clues that basically we're not getting some of the older missing challenge characters back. Who we're seeing this week is Batman Ninja Batman. He is super powerful. High stats, late game challenge character. And what I'm noticing more and more when I'm playing him, there's a couple of things that are actually interesting. One is there is basically zero range on the second hit of his special 2. That it is his special 2, when you give him Master's Death card, is completely incompatible with being able to launch a special as soon as you tag in. Which makes him harder to deal with, because in order to get full value for a special 2, both you have to be standing still. Your opponents basically run close enough that at the moment he's as close as if he was standing still in front of you. And if you don't, he will completely whiff on a second hit of a special 2, in which you're seeing that a few times, because we're really just playing around with him a little bit, and we've got some habits that we have from other characters who have a fully ranged special 2 that we can do it. And it wouldn't even be so bad, except the way Batman is played a lot of times is that he's got an interesting special 2 that is very much like any of the Batgirl's special 1. It stuns at the beginning. The stun does a very small portion of the full damage of the special, and all the damage comes after. So he is a prime candidate for any of the stun boosted damage gears like Cloak of Destiny or Necron Scythe.
Mm-hmm.
So that leads me to my second sort of revelation about him now that I'm playing him differently. So you'll notice that he's got Master's Death card, he's got Tantu Totem. He doesn't have either Cloak or Necron Scythe, which would boost his damage hugely. He's just got Enchantress Companion Gear. And the revelation is his Special 2 does more than enough damage without being stun boosted to knock out most characters.
It's true.
So, but hey, listen, it's totally fun to boost damage. But unless you use splash damage or Enchantress Companion Gear, getting 1 million damage on his Special 2 doesn't really get you any further than doing 100 whatever thousand or 200 something thousand when it's it crits, if it still knocks out the opponent. And we're getting more value because we're using Enchantress Companion Gear, and you can see maybe a few examples of where the opponent revives and we are able to knock out the opponent or handle it because the Enchantress Companion Skulls act like a special disabler, and they do damage to the revive health of the opponent in front of you.
So there we go.
And this is actually related, I think, to the first question that we've got.
Yeah, so our first question comes from Sanity Check Official. They say, I like your videos a lot, though I'd like to see more diversity than Hawkgirl/Raven every time. Less optimized, diverse builds for players without just the same S teams. Arkham Knight Batgirl is great to show, but it's a Bane video, so why not show other teams when you don't have this side S tier character? And so first off, I think that I want to say that this is probably the best way to get a question like this, right? Starting off by saying, I like your videos, this is what I would like to see different, and then sort of laying out your own reasoning for why, right? Because obviously...
I don't even think they need to say they like them.
Well, whatever. But, you know, but I'm saying that this is the nicer way of saying, hey, this is what I want you to do different, right? It's a little less pushy, and I think this is
right. That's fair.
A belief honestly helps. I want to start off by saying, like, we're not like... When we're gonna, and I think that we're gonna say why we do it the way we do it, right? Yeah. And why we're less likely to sort of modify it the way that you'd ask for. But this is not to say like, oh, you know, screw you, right?
Yeah, but I think there are certain sort of flaws in the question that I think I want to get to.
Yeah, fair enough.
So the first part is, if you want to see different teams that are good, we had a full season 12 of our Q&A, where we played all of our favorite teams.
Mm-hmm.
So those are good teams. There's at least 20-something good teams, and we played all of them.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. Each week in the challenge, the rationale is we want to demonstrate how a challenge character can be good as a main damage dealer. I don't really want to lose the fight, and often the easiest way to make them good and make them the star is Hawkgirl and Rebirth Raven. Because there are characters that are way better support, and it takes a lot of work to make them good.
Yeah.
And if you stick them on a team where they would be really good support, then they're not the star. And if you want to make them the star, you don't really need them to make everybody else that much better. You need to make them better.
Yeah.
And in this question, I feel like we're being, maybe criticized is too strong a word, but I feel like we're being criticized for doing two actually different things. So the comment about always using Hawkgirl or Rebirth Raven, well, we're not using Rebirth Raven with Arkham Origins Bane. And you can say that Hawkgirl is an S tier character, but she's not actually doing much of the damage. Right? So she's not actually involved. We just want her passive because it means that we get more of a chance to show off Bane. But the second part of the question and sort of criticism is that we're using Arkham Knight Batgirl because she's too good, and it makes this demonstration not as good. But we're actually demonstrating how Arkham Origins Bane can be better himself because now there's a second chance at him coming back in after being knocked out. So that would be very much like giving him a revive. But we're also making her better. Like, we're actually demonstrating that on a team with Arkham Origins Bane, she's better because we don't have to waste one of her slots to guarantee a bar of power when she tags in. We give her League of Assassins Knives. That just means there's more damage on her special one and splash when she comes in. But very few other characters, like we were talking about, has the same synergy where if Arkham Knight Batgirl's coming in, you've already had at least one bar of power with her if it's because the opponent almost knocked out Bane.
Yeah.
So I think it's actually if you're going to criticize us or just say that you'd rather see something different because these ones aren't as good, this is not the greatest example of it, because I think this actually deviates from a lot of the things we do. I totally acknowledge we use Hawkgirl and Rebirth Raven a lot for a very specific reason. This case, we actually switched around. We moved things around and played with something a little bit different.
And I think it is really the larger point is that I think teams are an interesting thing, right? There are some teams that are really obvious together, and there are some teams that are really good. But I think that when you get, there's a lot of ways to make sort of mid-tier teams, right?
There's a lot of ways to make bad teams. There's so many ways to make bad teams.
It doesn't really require nearly as much. And for mid teams, it really is, you're making it the team that way because those are the people that you've got, right?
Right.
So there's a lot less, I think that's of use in showing people like, oh, here's like a sort of random team that we've thrown together. Like if you happen to be missing these characters, right?
Or if you happen to be missing these gears.
Yeah. So, I do get it where you're seeing the team that we're showing and then you're seeing like the options that you have available to you. And you go, this is giving me less insight on what my team would look like with this character. But I think the thing is that the best way to get that insight is to just play. Because everybody's account is going to look different.
Yeah.
I think when sometimes people will give us specific, questions where they say, these are the people I have.
That's what I was going to say.
I'm missing.
If you tell us who you have and who you like to play with and who you want to make good, but then we also need to know the gears, then we can give you strategies for that. That's probably a better question. And we've answered that before.
Yeah.
And people have actually had specific suggestions. We've talked about it, maybe not played it, but we've talked about what kind of things you can do.
So what we're really just trying to do is show off somebody by themselves and show how they play in a well-supported vacuum, right? Where they're the star of the show.
Yeah.
And the other thing, too, is that, and this is just something that is purely an us thing, which is it's the amount of work that we're willing to do and the amount of time we're willing to spend, right? We're not making enough money off of this that there's any strong external pressure on us to do anything specific, right? Mm-hmm. If we were making a ton of money off of this, then we would be a lot more beholden to what gets the most views and what people like to watch and all that stuff. But we're not, and this isn't. So we basically are doing the amount of stuff that we still find enjoyable to do. And too much experimentation when we have to do it every week guaranteed and get footage and all this other stuff. It just becomes, it would become more of a chore.
And a lot of that footage would be crap.
Yeah.
Like, let's face it. If we're like, here's the thing. In my mind, my guess is that people probably don't want to see variations of subpar teams because, and there are lots of ways to do that. That probably don't want to see it, but I definitely don't want to play subpar teams when there's so many good ones available.
Yeah.
And the idea of just throwing teams together that we know are bad, it galls me.
Yeah.
I find that I just have trouble doing that. Like, I don't see that as a challenge where I'm just experimenting with bad teams. I've spent I've spent literally hundreds and thousands of hours playing with what was available.
Yeah.
I remember when I started that I basically played with the silver team.
Yeah.
That was Green Arrow and Harley Quinn, because those were the ones I got in the silver pack, and those were the ones that had promoted. So in single offline player mode,
I remember when we were still playing off of one account when we splurged for a Flash because your Flash was your favorite to play with. So we splurged for a silver Flash.
Yes. Oh, that was so amazing. And that's where I've developed my love for Flash because his basics are so fast. Mm-hmm. And our first gold character was Black Adam.
Yeah. But that special one that really hits a million times.
Yeah.
Which you need to knock out somebody when you're using in single player. Otherwise, you end up just giving them a ton of juice.
That's true. So, yeah, I think that's, yeah.
Yeah. So there we go. Maybe we'll do one more question quick.
Right.
So this one comes from the Good Lord 6518. They say, how do you use Arkham Origins Deathstroke right? I have him at Elite 2. His attack is kind of underwhelming as it doesn't scale well with gears because of the lack of synergy with his passive. And then Akshay Kulkarni 4668 says, need to level up his special 1 and use gears that boost special 1 damage. Also, if you have 5-star gears, the best combo I use is Cloak of Destiny, League of Assassins Knives, and LexCorp Gauntlets. And you might want to augment crit damage to maximize his special 1 and try to hit 200% on special 1. Of course, hope it helps.
So I want to say about the Good Lord's question, great insight. I mean, I don't know how obvious it is to other people, but when
he uses gears, it is only boosting his base damage.
Yeah.
When he's playing without any gears, his damage is, he hits harder than he would otherwise because his passive is Elite Soldier, reaching 200% damage on point blank special makes it unblockable and automatically crit. Bonus 8% damage per promotion up to a maximum of 80% Elite 10. So all those damage promotions or damage boosts that you get for each promotion makes him better, but it means that once you've already got him better, boosting him with more gears doesn't give the same bump that you'll see in other characters that don't have that passive.
Although, to be fair, at your tier of Elite 2, that's only a 16% damage boost, so you're only looking at, like a percentage of 16%. And so unless you're like more than doubling his damage, you're not losing a huge percentage of your total damage at this Elite level yet.
Right. And I will say, all right, so Akshay Kokami's answer is not awful, but I think it's half the answer. So they're talking a lot about boosting up the special one. I'm not sure I didn't completely agree with the choices for it. Cloak of Destiny, the real strength of that is the stun boost. There's a 20%, when you've maxed it out, there's only a 20% chance of stun on entry. I would prefer to have that on a character that has their own natural stun, whether antagon or in their specials. But the point of it is good because it's half the answer because of the passive, right? Reach 200% damage on point blank on special one. Right?
Yeah.
So if you want to maximize a special one and you get a little bit of practice and you hit 200% every time, that's pretty spectacular to have auto crit.
Auto crit is great because what that means is that you can maximize crit damage, which is a multiplier. So if you do special one damage and crit damage, you get to sort of, they add to each other more than you would get linearly.
And it's unblockable.
Yeah.
So I will say though, that because of his damage boost, because it's damage boost not just his special, it's damage boost completely. It's also damage boost to his basic attacks. He's got pretty good rhythm, and not on his tap, on his swipe combo. I found that for whatever reason, it was easier to time it to get it unblocked against an opponent that wasn't doing special on me. So you could potentially use him as a basic damage dealer, which is what a lot of people need to do when they don't have Tantu Totem yet. Yeah. So early game stuff, if you don't have really the top gears, there's lots of great basic damage gears that boost the crit chance and boost the percentage damage. And if you treat it like his passive when you get him to Elite 8 is like an 80% damage boost, then okay, so maybe the gears won't boost it on top of that, but it's like basically having a free gear slot.
Yeah.
And I mean, so here's the problem too. Like if we're going to put him to Elite 8 or even, Elite 10 or even just Elite 7 if you don't unlock his promotions, you can't control his level. And if you keep using him, he will get to level 50 eventually, no matter what. And potentially level 60 if you've got him at Elite 8. And the problem then becomes he's at a high enough stat level that in any kind of fight where you're facing opponents that are scaled up towards whatever you are, like Survivor or multiplayer, then you're going to need more gear. And it's easier to get him up to a high elite level and high promotion than it is to get all the gears maxed out that you want to use.
So there we go.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that will do it for this week. To finish up, we'd like to give a huge thank you to all of our patrons on Patreon. That is Michael Devries, Irvin, Ruiz, Hoshi127, Nora Klimek, and Miguel, who are supporting us on the credited level. We'd also like to give a huge thank you to all of you for watching the video. We'll see you next time.
Komoda.